Hey guys, welcome to Event-Driven Pool Management System version 1.10. Um, so in this version there are a few minor updates, just quality of life improvements, um, some bug fixes, and more events to help you in more situations. So the first thing you will notice is this events dropdown. In the code, this is an actual events class attached to the pool entity manager. And the reason I split these up, same thing with initialization events, spawn events, despawn events, termination events. The reason I split these up and put them into their own classes are for more complex cases where you want to set these through code. Instead of having to manually go through and add all these again, you can simply do something like pool entity manager dot events dot spawn events is equal to my custom spawn events variable. This could be handy in scriptable objects use cases or in editor window. I'm going to have to experiment with those and see what can be done. Hopefully I have an example for the next update regarding that. Otherwise, feel free to mess around with that. Also, just better organization for everything as well. So let's run through the events real quick, as some of them have changed names and some of them have changed functionality. So for initialization events, you've got your regular initialized event that runs whenever you call pool entity manager.initialize. It returns the pool entity manager and a list of all of the initialized pool entity objects. And then as it's going through that, it will fire off this event on entity initialize, pool entity manager pool entity. So you are able to access the pool entity the moment it is initialized during that whole initialization process. Same thing, so with spawn events, we now have spawning and on entity spawned. So spawning, it happens right before pool entity dot spawn is called, is fired. And there are certain cases where you want to use this over on entity spawned. In this case specifically, it's perfectly fine being here after pool entity dot spawn is called. That is because in this case that is fine. However, in more complex cases, I've had issues with UI objects where I would be spawning a text object, and because it was being spawned, or because I was dealing with it in this after event, it would cause some weird glitches regarding its positioning, regarding stuff like that. So the spawning event solves that. It'll fire right before the pool entity.spawn, and then it will fire through all its listeners, and then on entity spawn will fire. Despawn events, you have still the despawned all, which is only called whenever you call pool entity manager dot despawn all. And then on entity despawned, this is called after the pool entity has been despawned. In this iteration, things have changed a tiny bit. In order for this listener to be added to pool entity.despawn, you first need to spawn it. Otherwise, if you just call pool entity.despawn on the actual object before it has been spawned, this event will not fire. Termination events. Terminated just happens whenever pull entity manager.terminate is called. And then on entity terminated, this will happen no matter what, regardless of if it's in despawn or spawn. And it will fire when pull entity.terminated event has been fired. And then a few more changes in a similar regard regarding the pull entity class. Pretty much the same thing, very similar. You have that whole events, it's a different events class, and it contains initialized, spawn, despawn, terminated. So the whole functionality for pull entities themselves stays the same. However, they are now contained in that class as to add for more flexibility in your programming, in your setup, etc., etc. So that's all the changes as of now. As I've said, not really sure, aside from bug fixes, what the next steps are. It seems those editor tools may come in handy and be useful, so that you're not setting these up every single time for every single game object. You'll just simply be able to copy them and paste them, essentially. So keep a lookout for those. Hope you enjoyed this update. Please give me any feedback or suggestions. I would be glad to hear them. Thanks. Have a nice day.